Moment, space-wise.
Let's create lives.
Moment, space-wise. God the Father has a body. It's a very tone body.
He looks good. He looks good.
Moment, space-wise. Moment, space-wise. Basement, basement, basement. Basement, basement, basement. Magic underwear fitting tight. Magic underwear is feeling right.
Space-wise.
Moment, space-wise. Moment, space-wise. Lord Cola.
I would like to have intimacies with you.
On the planet of Naboo. Magic underwear. Where? Right there. Moment, space-wise.
Let's create lives.
Moment, space-wise. God the Father has a body. All right, what's up? Welcome, everybody. Another live stream. It's been about 6 years since my man, Jonathan Pageau, was with us, and we had a great time.
6 years?
I think it was about 6 years, 2020, maybe 2021 or 2, 5, something like that.
Man, it's nuts. That's nuts. Well, it's good to see you.
Absolutely, man. We had a good time at a dinner in Texas. We got to providentially meet up with Jonathan and Deacon Roland and Andrew and Rachel, and we had a great time there with Chase Haggard as well. I think you spoke at a OCA event there in Texas. Is that right?
We're actually doing some planning because, as you know, Deacon Seraphim and I, we run a publishing company, and so it was actually just there to do like a planning week, for our upcoming publishing stuff.
Awesome. So all the cameras are working amazingly. No boomer tech issues. Now that I say that, everything's going to completely collapse. But bro, it's been a long time. You have had a lot happening. A lot of things have happened in the last 5 or 6 years for both of us.
Yeah.
Let me ask you first before we get into, we're going to talk today about Symbolic World Conference that Jonathan has coming up very soon. We're going to talk about the new graphic novels that he's worked on and put out based on probably fairy tales that probably most people are familiar with. But I want to get into that as well as your take on it and how you presented these stories and why. And but tell us first, for my audience, if they don't know you, we know you, but there might be new people. I was on Jesse Lee Peterson, a bunch of things. There might be some new people over here. Tell us about you first.
Yeah, so I could say I'm mostly an artist. In some ways, I'm a liturgical artist. For many years I was carving icons, within the Orthodox Church. Involved in the church in different ways, on my parish council in different, in different ways that I'm involved in the church. But I guess was it like 2016? I met Jordan Peterson, and I'd been developing with my brother kind of a way to try to help people understand an ancient Christian cosmology. But I felt like there was it was very difficult to talk about it. Like it was in the new atheist kind of top of the new atheist phase. People just looked at you like you're an idiot. And so when I met Jordan, I realized that he had a little bit of that bridge, to bridge over into the secular space. And so I became friends with him. And then when he became famous, he just basically threw me out there. And I started talking about symbolism in public in ways that I never thought was possible. So that's what I mostly do now is, I have a YouTube channel. I go to conferences invited by universities, by different groups to talk about Christian symbolism and why it's relevant, how it's related to the meaning crisis, you could say, the fact that everybody's kind of steeped in nihilism, how it's related also to cog-sci and to, complexity theory, emergence, all of these kind of new scientific developments. There seem to be let's say, turning more towards a traditional worldview. And so that's what I do. And now I have we have a publishing company, because I'm mostly an artist, and so obviously on YouTube I mostly talk about symbolism. But I think the most important thing is to engage in culture and to make things and to kind of present beauty. And so we're also publishing these fairy tales and these graphic novels as a way to, you could say, get involved in culture without not just commenting on culture.
I know that when we talked last time, we did a popular live stream that got quite a good amount of views, years ago, and we talked quite a bit about the reality of symbolism and how the symbolic world isn't an abstracted sort of, necessarily fictional. It could be fictional, but it's not a merely abstracted way of speaking or understanding the world through a kind of a network of symbols. What would you say is something that in the last 5 or 6 years you've come to learn, or something new that you've understood about that whole perspective? Maybe not. Maybe you still have the exact same perspectives, but I think
I
all
mean, I
of
would
us.
say,
Yeah. What's something new you've
yeah,
learned?
I would have the basic main perspective. But I think one of the things in the past maybe 6 years, 5 6 years, that I've learned is a way to talk about these patterns and the symbolic thinking in a manner that connects more with the scientific world. I'm actually not a big fan of. I'm not like a scientific person, and I think I'm kind of like you. I see science as a second order degree thing.
Yeah.
But I also notice that people still think that way. And so through, different biologists and different cog sci people, to talk about relevance and complexity and attention, all of these terms that aren't, particular, even consciousness, like that's not a Christian term, right? But we can use that term to help people understand what it is we're talking about when we talk about man as a co-creator, or man as a microcosm of God's creation. And that's what's, to me, that's been an exciting thing. Like, it's been exciting to be able to, like, just this weekend I'm going to go spend the weekend with Brett Weinstein and like duke it out, like in private, in terms of helping the biologists see how their categories, they're not totally sufficient to understand these phenomena like religion or faith or all these things.
Yeah, it's like you have a kind of a ministry or an apostleship. This is what my spiritual father would always say, like, "You have a ministry to comedians and people." Maybe you're able to get over here and talk to these, these biologists. That's great, and put it into a language that they can conceptualize and understand. That's pretty awesome. So, can we out? Did that come about through Jordan, or
I
how
mean,
did that happen?
obviously, yeah, obviously it came out to Jordan. In some ways, I could see that he was using different terms. Meeting John Vervaeke, who is not really a Christian, but has kind of come around closer to Christianity, is willing to engage. For example, like to get scientists to talk about transpersonal beings, like we say transpersonal agency, right? To think that there are actual wills that act on us, which is something that I think until not that long ago, scientists would be would have a great difficulty in admitting. But more and more, it's almost impossible to ignore it as we kind of see these influences run through our society. And it's the same with AI. It's like we spent a few hundred years now eliminating the language the humanity had to talk about non-human intelligence, and now we're building one, for goodness sake. But we've lost the wisdom that the ancient had to kind of understand these non-human intelligences. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great topic to kind of kick it off, and then we'll get into the books and the conference as well. Of course, I'm not going to forget those. But what did you wh- what do you make of AI? And I know that's kind of a generic question
Yeah.
because you mentioned non-human intelligence, and in the Orthodox worldview, we have the idea that there are other intelligence. There's angels, there's demonic, there's divine intelligence. Um, do you and I'm kind of agnostic, not because, I think that anything is inherently evil or necessarily I think they're tools, but I see the potentiality of it going either way in terms of a disaster for humanity, or something that may just be a fad, or something that's overhyped and not a big deal. What's your thought on it?
Yeah, well, the way that I tend to see it is I try to not reduce the AI to the actual system, right? To think about AI as just the computer system. I try to see the AI as, of course, there's the whole computer system, but there's also all of the structures around it, the structures of meaning that are kind of being invoked around it. And so, for example, people say, uh, well, is AI conscious? Can it be conscious? All these questions. And my answer is usually I don't really know that, and I don't really care. What really matters is how we treat it. That is, I mean, you could ask the question, like, did the idols in the temples of the ancient people, like, were they actual vehicles for gods, or maybe they were just fake, or maybe it was a bit of both. Like sometimes they were fake, sometimes they would really kind of be invoking these true demonic
So I have you
presences.
on record saying that sometimes they're faking gay.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's for sure. Especially
You
those
heard it
idols.
right there.
Yeah, you heard it right there. And you see that in the Old Testament too. Like sometimes it seems like the idols are just like these pieces of wood that have nothing, and sometimes
Yeah.
it seems like they are these kind of portals for other
Right.
intelligences. And I think that it's mostly the way we treat them that will manifest. So it's like if there are demons that are acting through AI, they're not just acting through the computer, they're acting through the entire system around it that is making us revere it and ultimately serve it. And I think that that's where you see is that the tendency we have to serve this thing, and to immediately defer to it, right? You meet people all the time. They're like, well, Grok says this, as if it's God speaking, like as if God is speaking from heaven. And then because Grok has said it, I think that this is an image of a kind of desire to move toward a type of idolatry. And it helps us understand idolatry, actually, because it's hard for modern people to understand idolatry in the kind of pagan sense, because we don't have statues that we, open the nostrils of and blow, spirit into. Like we don't have this idea that there could be a thing that we make that we serve, when it talks about that in scripture. But now we're literally seeing it happen. Like we're making something and then we have a tendency to want to serve it. And I think that it's in that context that it's a problem. And also, like, if you look at the bigger picture of what it's serving, then you realize that it's ultimately serving mammon. And so because it's serving mammon, it's already a problem. It means that all of the attention structures that it's invoking in us, the fact that, for example, both Grok and ultimately now OpenAI, they're having kind of porn bots, right? They're having sex bots that are sex chats and that's because they need attention in order to make money. And so they're using the same type of structures of attention that the internet has always used. And therefore there's a sense in which in that sense, I see that it is becoming a vehicle for a demonic influence.
I've seen a huge drop in my OnlyFans since the bots have come out, because I can't compete with Robo J, who's 10 times hotter than the real J. So
That's right. That's for sure.
no, Jonathan is spot on there. I agree with the temptation of idolatry. I mean, one thing we've noticed in the realm of, say, debate and apologetics is that people will, especially the younger you go, they rely on it more than older generations. So they will sort of defer to it, like you said, like it's the arbiter of every discussion or debate, even though we all know that Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT,
Hallucinate.
like they're wrong all the time. They get things wrong. So
time.
why would we defer to this, like, not just fallible pseudo deity, but like constantly wrong sort of deity? It's kind of absurd. And then I noticed too in debates, a lot of times you catch them using ChatGPT in the middle of a debate. So it's like that's cheating, but everyone's now relying on this. And I think you're absolutely right that the key temptation will be idolatry there. So,
Yeah.
so little sidetrack. I know that you talked about this in the past, and this is not to get a debate going or anything like that. I just want to hear what your position is, because actually Neil and I had a really long conversation about this. So I'm just curious what your thoughts were, because I know you touched on this a long time ago. What's your take on Bitcoin? Do you think that it's an abstraction of something that should be kind of in the physical realm?
It's weird because when I think about the Bitcoin as a kind of symbolic thing, a symbolic structure, to be honest, I don't completely understand what it is and what it's doing. I do, though, in terms of power, I do see it as something that's quite dangerous. That is, in the sense that, okay, so if you think about our situation right now, so now we have these elites. We don't actually. It turns out, I guess, with the Epstein stuff, and you've known this, like we don't totally know who all of them are, but we kind of basically know at least the ones that are visible. And although there's a lot of trash, we still have roads and things are still kind of functioning, like they're still kind of working. One of the problems when I hear people say we need to move to Bitcoin and move away from money is that we don't know who has the Bitcoin. Where we don't, it's a secret. Like there's a secret elite that holds this money. And if we move more towards Bitcoin, it means that at some point the power structure will be revealed, a new power structure that we don't even know what it is. We don't even know who it is that holds this amount, these monies. And so I think that in that sense, that's what I think is dangerous, because in a in a normal world, the currency is given by the king or by the authority, right? So it's like the authority will guarantee its value with a stamp of the king, literally on the or the emperor on the coin, right? And so this is in some ways a sense in which we know where this value comes from, we know who's guaranteeing it, and it is kind of running through our world. But Bitcoin, we don't know. It's a secret. There's a secret group that we don't know who actually created it. We kind of have theories about that. We know that it's related possibly to secret to like government agencies. I know that the people that developed the Bitcoin then ended up working with the government to develop their kind of digital currency. And so all of that kind of stuff is making me suspicious about it. I have some Bitcoin. I don't have a lot. I have some. And I understand how people see it as a kind of freedom and a kind of power that isn't under the state, but it also means that it hides a kind of secret power that we don't know what it is. I don't know if you've thought about it in those terms.
Yeah, it's a whole issue, and I didn't mean to go down that sidetrack. I have some thoughts on all that, but again, I didn't mean this to be like a Bitcoin discussion, but I think the response to that would be, from the vantage point of if you look at like Saifedean Amos's book on it. And I think Jordan did a podcast with him or two in the past. I think even on Bitcoin, but he makes a great point that one reason that you would want to remove the money printing power from the state is because the state has the tendency to centralize it and to use the temptation to print it into oblivion when the state needs money. So the idea there is just simply against the sort of Keynesian principle of infinite money expansion, which deflates, right,
Yeah, I
the
agree.
purchasing the excuse me, inflates the purchasing power. The other thing too is that Bitcoin isn't really private; it's semi-private. So the largest wallets are all public. It is
Hmm.
true that we don't know who has the Satoshi wallet, but most of the other large wallets, it's pretty clear that people know that it's BlackRock, it's Michael Saylor, it's some other big companies. But the other thing too is that the way the Bitcoin's decentralization network is set up, with all of the nodes and with the way the protocol works in terms of changing the protocol, you can't change the protocol unless you get the majority of the nodes to run a different system or a different protocol or a change. So it's really difficult to get that. And that's a feature and it's not a bug. And so that means that one person or one entity, even if they were to dump all of their Bitcoin, which there would not really be an incentive to do so as it continues to go up in value, they can't really destroy the market or manipulate it in some massive way. They could affect it perhaps a little bit if BlackRock dumped a bunch, it would definitely
Yeah.
hurt the price. But point being is that even the system was set up such that having a bunch of Bitcoin still doesn't allow you to change the network, and it's still only semi-private. So um, that's my response to those specific
Yeah, yeah.
objections.
I
But
mean, I think I'm definitely attracted to the decentralization question aspect of Bitcoin for sure, and I agree with most of the points you made. I tend to be pretty black pilled on the question of money, which is that when someone tells me that the U.S. currency isn't backed by anything, my tendency is to think that it's actually backed by weapons. That's what backs the U.S. currency.
no, you're
It's not
absolutely right.
gold. It's that's what makes the U.S. dollar valuable, is how is actually guns. So that's why I'm also kind of cynical about Bitcoin in the sense, at least in the idea that Bitcoin would replace the monetary system. Is that the monetary system is actually run by weapons, and so it can always be an alternative to let's say state run systems, but in the end the real power is there. So
Let's get into real briefly, and we don't have to go too far into this, but you're very close to Dr. Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has had a tremendous influence on everybody out here in the internet sphere, and beyond that, in academia and so forth. What where can we ask you? And I know that I'm not trying to pry into things, but
yeah.
what's going on? Where's he been? Can we talk about that? What's your assessment of like his path. Where's he at spiritually? What's going on physically? Can we ask you that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't want to go into too many private details of his life. It's his life, but he definitely is ill, and the problem with his illness is that nobody really knows exactly what the source is. There might be several sources. It's related to his autoimmune stuff, which is what led him to do carnivore. It's also related to his depression cycles that he's had, and his father had, and everything. But it is also in some ways related to the very first time, because everybody knows about how he was prescribed benzodiazepines, and then those started to really act on his system. And obviously he hasn't taken benzos since then, but he still suffers from the consequences that of the benzos back in those days. So he has these weird symptoms of akathisia with his, where he has this pain all over his body and he just can't function. And so he kind of goes up and down. I saw him a few months ago, where I swear, like I was there for 3 days, and on the third day, it felt like he was just Jordan Peterson. Like he had never been sick, and he was talking about doing podcasts, and was excited. And then I saw him again maybe about a month ago, where it was much more difficult. He would, he could stay focused and kind of entertain you for like maybe half an hour at a time, and then after that, he would just get kind of oppressed. And and I mean, I think I'm not afraid to say it. I do believe that this is a spiritual thing ultimately, that in some ways there are all these mechanical causes that we can't totally discern, but I think that ultimately the cause is a spiritual one, in the sense that I think, like most of us, and because of the role that he's played, and because in some ways of the moments where he's manifested a lot of ambiguity about what he believes, and what, on what side he is, I think that ultimately I think God's kind of holding up him against the wall. And in the end, only he can submit. No one can do it for him, and no one can submit to God. And but I would say that for sure he's not an atheist anymore. When we're there, we pray together, and his wife prays. And he's just, he's also very honest. I don't know how to say, like, he can't pretend to believe something, and so he still kind of struggles to submit and to believe. So
Yeah, and all the chat, of course, is saying we should pray for Jordan Peterson. Absolutely, yeah. I've been praying for Jordan Peterson for a long time, and I think everybody should, and I'm sure Jonathan does for sure. Guys, if you would hit like and share, we just hit over 1,000 on this early live stream. Early for me. We've been in sort of a streak of doing it later, but I do intend to go back to the sort of 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock slot again. We've only been doing the late night live streams because we were forced to. Now let's talk a little bit about your graphic novels that I've got here. And you were kind enough to give me like a whole batch of these. I really appreciate it. Jamie's already read, by the way, the Snow White. She thought that this
cool.
was really cool. Um, I, I'm looking forward to Big Bad Wolf. I've always liked those stories. So, there's a whole bunch of these. There is the Tale of Rapunzel. There is Jack and the Beanstalk. And would this be what you were referring to with you and Deacon Roland publishing?
Yeah, so I mean, before I met Deacon Seraphim, we had already started publishing the series called God's Dog, which was a series of graphic novels. And then I'd started to publish the first Snow White book too. And then Deacon Seraphim, he's really like I would say, we tend to say Renaissance man. I would actually say he's a medieval man, in the sense that he both understands the theology and the mythical aspect of reality, but also he's a business guy. And so he's been helping me really run the press, and we're trying to like grow and stuff. So the idea is to really, because you've noticed probably how Disney basically doesn't want our fairy tales anymore. Like, Disney just hates them, and they hate our stories actually. And so they
Right.
continue to make versions of them, but they hate them. And so there's a level of cynicism and of deconstruction that becomes so ridiculous that it's not even interesting anymore, right? Because to make deconstruction interesting, you actually have to suggest what the original story is, and then deconstruct it. But if you've deconstructed it for like 20 years, then who cares? Who even cares what we don't even know what makes Snow White interesting. So to me, it seemed like it was a good time to revive the stories, right? And to go back into these stories, the fairy tales, and to tell them in a beautiful way and in a celebratory way. And so that's really the plan, is to kind of go back into these stories. And then also, I grew up Protestant. I don't know, in my Baptist background, I remember people telling me that fairy tales were pagan. You can't read fairy tales; they're all pagan. And when I revisited them as an adult, I realized, no, these are not pagan. Like, these are deeply Christian. Some are a little, some have ambiguity to them, but there's a deeply Christian imagery in the stories, and I'm trying to make that shine, right? So, we know that there's a relationship between a young woman who eats an apple and falls dead. Like, we've heard that story before, right? So what's the connection? Why is it in Snow White, but also in Adam and Eve? And I'm trying to kind of make that shine in the story. So that's the thing. So those are the fairy tale, but then there's also the God's Dog series. The God's Dog series is like, that's the graphic novels, and they probably would be more for your viewers, in the sense that I'm trying to tell, basically, I see Tolkien and C.S. Lewis as a kind of Old Testament, right? There was something about when they wrote their books, which is that they had to couch their Christian stories in almost like a pagan worldview, right? They had to use a kind of pre-Christian worldview in order to be able to tell their stories. And my sense is that we should now do that within the Christian story, and go back to the medieval kind of Dante possibility of telling a Christian epic. So the concept is that, the garments of skin that were given to Adam are like passed down from generation to generation, and they hold this kind of civilizational power, which is not something I came up with. It comes from the book of Jasher, actually. It comes from intertestamentary text. And so this is now happening. The story itself is happening in the time of St. George, and like St. George and St. Christopher and St. Simeon the Stylite, and like St. Mercurius, and all these like warrior saints and extreme monastics are in this story. And then there are also like giants and the Leviathan and all the cool stuff from the Bible that the modern people don't like to talk about because they find it embarrassing. You just packed it into one big story. So anyway, so that's one of the things we're doing. That I'm pretty excited about. I wrote that with my brother a long time ago, and we're finally publishing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really cool. Shout out to Neil in the chat already. Dirt Poor Robbins is
Hey.
super chatting. We both have become good friends with Neil, and he's a really cool guy. I appreciate him and his family. They're really cool. It's funny you said that about the way that you wanted to speak to the sort of present day pagan audience that we have in the West, unfortunately. I remember in a grad class that I had on Beowulf, we were discussing the fact that most of the scholars believe that the translations of Beowulf that the medieval monastics were doing, they were actually kind of putting in Christian themes as they were translating it, as a way to speak to the pagan tribes that they were trying to convert. And my professor was arguing that was the reason why you'll see what seems to be pagan, and then all of a sudden you have this like almost Christian element within, his actions with Grendel and this kind of stuff. And then I think similar arguments are made about how you have the story of Odin being eventually killed on a tree, that the monastics were sort of gradually putting those ideas in. Had you heard that? Because that was
Yeah, of
something.
course.
Okay.
I mean, I grew up with all that nonsense, but then it was even worse. It was like King Arthur is also like a pagan thing. And basically all the medieval things that are interesting are basically just pagan, and we grew up with that too, like all the Christmas traditions, everything. It's really
No,
a
no, no, no.
Protestant.
Let me be clear. No, my professor was a professing evangelical Christian. He wasn't criticizing this. He
And
was
he
saying,
still thought that Beowulf was not a Christian text.
no, 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 no. What he's saying is that there's some original Beowulf, perhaps, that was pagan that we don't have access to. What he's arguing is that the versions that we have of the story of Odin or of
Okay, yeah.
Beowulf are now Christianized versions, which I don't have a problem with. I'm just saying that he's arguing. He was pointing out that the medieval monastics were doing what you're doing. That's all he's saying.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
I
yeah.
think that I thought you were saying mostly like that it was like this thin.
No, no, no.
I think that one of the things that for sure happened in the Middle Ages, and you see that definitely with the Scandinavian stories, is the desire to kind of integrate these stories within the kind of universal history vision, right? That is to see them as leading to the revelation of Christ, and ultimately being downstream, from the revelation of Christ, even though it was in the past, let's say. And so you can see that in the Scandinavian epics, for example, they make the Scandinavian characters descendants from Trojan refugees, and you see they're not actually gods in the text, like we've now say that, but in the actual text, they're these heroes that come from Troy and came to Scandinavia to set up the civilization there, just like Brutus came from Troy to set up in Geoffrey of Monmouth to set up the English, to set up England. Well, not England, but Britain, let's say. And so I think that that's right. In some ways, there is, and we do that. Like our whole series of podcasts with Deacon Seraphim on the symbolic world is what we call the universal history, which is to show how the medievals saw. We're trying to integrate the pagan past and kind of prune it and make it revelatory of Christ. How they saw themselves. Like I said, they would read the Aeneid and the different Homeric epics and kind of integrate them. And so that's definitely in some ways what we're trying to do. Now, the difference with what we're trying to do is we're doing it specifically in the Christian cosmology. That is, we're using the images from the Bible, the giants, the Canaanites, the Nephilim, the Leviathan, all of these kind of images that are there, the garments of skin, the mark of Cain, like all of these images that we see in the Bible, and then we're pulling them together in a kind of epic that is happening in the late 4th or early 5th century in the Eastern Empire. So that's the difference that I'm seeing. It's more like saying, can we do what Tolkien did and what C.S. Lewis did, but actually do it in a way that is in the biblical worldview and not in outside of it, So that's definitely what interests me. But in terms of Beowulf, I want to say one thing for sure, that we did a whole class on Beowulf, Deacon Seraphim and I, that people can see on the Symbolic World. And Deacon Seraphim demonstrates very, very strongly how much it's a Christian text. And he does it by showing how the author actually seems to be referring to Boethius in his text constantly, and how he's referring obviously to all these traditions about Cain and about these monsters as being descendants of Cain, and that is it's actually a very, very deep strain. It's not like it's not a superficial transformation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's really, I mean, and that to my professor's credit, I mean, he was really good at that. Bringing out a lot of those themes and elements, and I think that's a really cool thing. I appreciate what you're doing. Now, if people want to get access to these, do they go to Symbolic World, or where do we buy these?
Yeah, that's the best place to go. You can get them on Amazon, obviously, but we prefer, we prefer people to come on our website and get them from there. We usually also have like bundles and different specials that we're offering for people who want to get them directly from us.
I do want to mention before we get to other topics and your conference that's upcoming. I do have the link, by the way, guys, to Symbolic World in the show description. So if you want to get access to these, do you do signed copies or anything like that from the site or anything?
Yeah, we do have some. What we tried to. I mean, we ran out of a lot of the signed copies for sure. We're also doing events. Like every time I do an event, usually we'll try to have a book table, and then I'll do like a book signing. So yeah, so the conference is part of that for sure. The conference, we're going to do like a big book signing. People want to have their book signed, we'll be able to bring them or buy them there and have them signed.
So that is linked below, you guys. And I would say these are really neat. Jamie was really impressed. I've not read it yet, so I'm just going from what Jamie said.
I'm actually really curious. If you do read it, I would love to hear what you think, especially about the God's dog stuff, because the God's dog stuff is more kind of male oriented and more, it's still aimed at, like teenage years, but I think as adults we can still kind of appreciate it. If you know the Bible well, I'm curious to see, you'll be surprised at because there's like a whole biblical story that is happening in the background that we see snippets of, like how the garments of skin get transmitted, and there's all this stuff going on, and there's like Saint Michael's sword and all of these features. And so I would love to hear what you think if you ever have the chance to read it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have the mind, mentality, and maturity of a teenager, so I'm sure I'll vibe with it very well. So,
but do you read a lot of fiction? I don't even know. Do you read fiction?
No, we do. In fact, in the last several years, we've branched out into doing a lot of literary analysis on my channel.
Yeah, nice.
We've probably done 20 or 30 lit pieces. In fact, my undergraduate degree is philosophy and history, and then my almost grad degree is lit.
Okay,
So
I didn't know that.
I'm a huge lit guy. But the problem with lit on YouTube is that if you start talking about literature, if I was getting for at one
Things go
point like
down.
yeah, I was getting like 3,000 on a live stream at one point. We had worked it all the way up to 3,000. Then I
Yeah.
started doing lit streams, 1,000. So if you want to cut your audience by 2/3, I recommend doing a lot of lit streams. But I love it. I love it. So we just the last that we did, by the way, speaking of Tolkien, was The Hobbit, and
Oh yeah.
we're gonna do the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy. I haven't read The Hobbit until recently, rereading it
Okay.
probably since maybe high school. So it was
Yeah,
nice
yeah,
to go back. And one thing I noticed, I want to get your take on this because, of course, everybody has Tolkien theories and their own sort of Tolkien takes, Tolkien hot takes, right? Um, I noticed that the Arkenstone, I think, was a reference. This is my theory to Christ as the divine stone cut without hands, and he's in the midst of, in the presence of the dwarves, who I think Tolkien said explicitly do represent the Jews, and they don't recognize him. And in fact, at the end, at the end, Gandalf rolls out a coffin, and there's a coffin with the Arkenstone in it. And then eventually they come to realize that he is their precious treasure. So I have a theory, like you said, about Tolkien kind of referencing the Old Testament. And I think he did that quite a bit. In fact, he translated the book of, I want to say the book of Jonah for the Jerusalem Bible, which was one of the Vatican
Mm.
publications many years ago. So I think he was very familiar with the Old Testament and the Deuterocanonical texts. I think the Oliphants come from elements of Maccabees. But do you have any theories on Tolkien's, what he's putting into the novels, or
Yeah,
what's
I
going
think
on?
I try to take Tolkien on his word, right? So Tolkien said that he didn't like symbolism, but he meant by
Yeah,
symbolism,
this is an important point.
yeah, what he meant by symbolism was a one-on-one reference, and actually probably was a bit of a swipe at C.S. Lewis. You know, it's like when you read the Narnia books, yeah, Aslan's Jesus. Like we just know that Aslan's Jesus, and I think Tolkien he said that his stories are applicable, and that actually it's funny because I think that's actually what symbolism is that he's actually he's actually telling a story with the right pattern, right? It's like he's bringing these elements together in a kind of universal true pattern, and then what you can see is a kind of reflection. You see it then you could refract in the world, and you can apply it to different things. And so I do think that, for example, the way that the dwarves, what they are in the culture of the Lord of the Rings is probably, like you said, akin to some aspects of how the Jews participated in Western civilization. I don't know to what extent it was like a direct one-on-one, but there are these you could say these smells, because he's actually, you could say he's actually applying a true pattern to his story, right? A pattern that reflects itself. And so in the medieval world, we had, for example, a natural hierarchy in the world. We had those that pray, those that fight, those that work, and there was a kind of idea of an ontological structure of the world. And you could say, well, it's funny because that ontological structure kind of looks like the Vedic caste system, because they had the Brahmin, the Kshatriya, and so you say, but does it mean that one copied the other? It's like, no, maybe both of them are reflecting some aspect of a kind of normal pattern where we understand that we have to be aligned spiritually first, and that gives legitimacy to political power. And without those two, then you can't have trade, you can't have work, none of it works. And so there's like a kind of a natural hierarchy. And I think that that's the kind of thing that Tolkien put in his world, and then it will reflect in the way that you say, which is that there will be images that we can apply to our let's say to the history of the West.
Yeah, it's funny you said that because, of course, people are always referring to, they'll say, "Oh, did you read the introductory essay where he says he doesn't like symbolism?" Yeah, I'm familiar with that. But if you read what he says, people have said to me, "Are you writing about World War II and
Yeah.
Hitler and this kind of stuff?" And he says, "No, because if that was the case, there would have been very different accounts of what happened with, the villains and with the wicked figures." And he says, when he says he doesn't like allegory or quote symbolism, he says, if you mean by this something that is not historical or against history or not real, he says that abstracted sense of symbolism. And I'm thinking here in the sense of like Origin, right? Origin usually tried to utilize symbology as a way to be ahistorical or to
That's
negate
it.
the reality. And if you listen to, I think her name is it Rachel Brown? She has a whole bunch of Tolkien lectures. She's a professor, I think, at Chicago University.
Yeah, I
She
know.
points out that that Tolkien ironically, saw his novels as historical fiction.
Mm.
So it's not that they don't contain symbolism, in my view, my understanding. It's that he doesn't like symbolism that's pitted against history or not quote real. And when I was reading that, I was like, this is sounds like the way kind of Pageau talks about symbology and
Yeah, for
symbolism.
sure.
So it was
Yeah,
cool.
for sure.
So
I
I appreciate what you're doing there, and I appreciate your analysis. By the way, we got over 1,500. We got 1,600 in the chat. Welcome everybody. If you would hit like and share, you can also support the streams through Streamlabs or through YouTube Super Chats. And of course, be sure and subscribe to Jonathan Pageau. He will be linked. His channel will be linked in a moment in the show description. But do you any last words on what you think of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings or anything like that? I don't want to cut you off. You had more to say, and then we're going to get into the conference.
No, I do like this. I do think that some of the analogies that you brought up are interesting, right? In the sense of the Arkenstone as being this, like you said, something that a kind of truth or heart that they don't recognize, and then that is presented to them, And I didn't remember this idea that he rolls it out in a coffin, which is very fascinating as this kind of resurrection motif. So that's a super interesting.
I didn't remember that either because in the movie version, Peter Jackson's version, like they just kind of stand there with, the Elf King and then they just sort of open it up and have it in a cloak or in their pocket or something. But in reality, it's Gandalf is actually disguised as an old crotchety man and he rolls it out in a coffin and Thorin is sitting up there on the wall and he's looking down all arrogant. And then when when they open the coffin and he sees it as Gandalf, he's like, awestruck. But that would have been a much more powerful, I think, image had they put that in the film. But anyway, um, let's talk about perhaps the conference, which is the Symbolic World Conference that is in the show description, you guys. It's listed, excuse me, as it's occurring in Broadview Heights, Ohio, May 14th to 16th, and the tickets are right there in the link. Now, Jonathan, you've done tons and tons of talks, tons and tons of conferences. Where has all of that led to with this conference? What is this about? What's the focus? Why do we need to be at this?
Yeah, I think that most of the time when I'm doing conferences, I'm at somebody else's conference and I'm participating in some other narrative or some other story. And in some ways, this is a way to kind of gather what it is that the symbolic world's vision of what it is we want to do. It's also about a kind of actionable thing we want. We want to, it's called it's about remembering the cosmic epic, or like or recasting the cosmic epic. The first one was the cosmic image, and so it's mostly about gathering the people that want to create this change that we're already seeing happening. We're seeing it happen, of course, in these massive conversions to orthodoxy. We're seeing it happen all around, but there's also a narrative element to that. There's also a kind of remembering element to that, where we need to actively remember the great stories, our fairy tales, the great epics, the story of the saints. And so we want to kind of bring people together in person. We noticed that the first Symbolic World Summit we did, that bringing people together in person, it has such a huge effect on their life. It's all of a sudden it rips you off of this screen and it puts you in the flesh with other people. And we've seen, actually, from the first summit, we've seen all these collaborations and friendships and people working together on different projects come out of it. And so we thought that we need to do that. We need to do that again. And so we're going to have Father Josiah is going to be, one of the main speakers, and then Mary Harrington, which in some ways stretches what the symbolic world does, right? From the sacred to into the secular space, from let's say talking about how to live a holy life, all the way to social commentary and to commentary about big social transformations. And then there'll be all these other speakers as well. But there'll be a bunch of people who follow me will be surprised at who's coming. There'll be all these people that have been on my channel, that have been around, that will also be there in person. It'll be a great time to share meals together and to get to meet each other. So.
Yeah, and I know my wife right now is reading Mary Harrington's book, her one of her critiques of feminism. I don't think you and I talked about this. Last time we discussed iconography quite a bit and the theology of the icon. Um, what is your take on feminism? And I know that's kind of a generic question, but Mary Harrington made me think of that. What is your take on this inversion? And I assume you see it
Yeah, yeah.
as that.
Well, I think it's a trick. I think that it in some ways was a trick that was played mostly on women, which is in some ways to use the moniker of empowerment to actually diminish all the very powerful and amazing qualities that women have. And so instead of saying, there's something definitely that happened, with the Reformation and the Enlightenment, there is a kind of hyper masculinity that began to be present. That is, with the removing the veneration of the Virgin from the public world, and focusing on science and on technology and on political power, there was a kind of diminishing of feminine space. But now, instead of saying let's revalue the beauty of the feminine and all the feminine symbolism, we basically said, hey, women can be men too. And I think that that's really what feminism is to in some ways trick women into believing that they should be men and that they can be men, which is both ridiculous and makes them miserable. And I would much rather advocate for a a kind of representation of the great mystery of the feminine, of course, through the Theotokos, but then also of all these other, powerful feminine. The
Right.
idea that there were no powerful feminine figures in the history of the West is like just so ridiculous. There are so many powerful figures, and I keep pointing to people that in the history of Christianity, there's almost always a woman that's hidden behind in secret, even before any, Constantine's mother, Augustine's mother, the Cappadocians, their sister. There's always a woman that's there before, and then there's a masculine figure that appears at the front. And we see that even in scripture with the Theotokos at the wedding of Cana. We see it with Pilate's wife that's hiding in the background and is telling him, don't do that. And so this kind of secret power of the feminine is something that we've like forgotten. And now we're like, we want women to all be politicians and to be out to be CEOs and to be out in the public sphere, as if that is something, as if that's the only way that there can be value in someone's life. So I just think it's a deep mistake. And I hope, for their own sake, that women will be able to wake up from it and try to embrace the beauty of femininity.
Yeah, I tend to agree with my friend Tim Gordon that it's sort of, and I think Rachel Wilson says the same thing. It's the sort of the original gender dysphoria in terms of Western civilizational liberalism, right? You couldn't have had the Skittles stuff and trans had you not first had the gender dysphoria that you can trick a woman into thinking that unless she becomes and has the attributes and qualities of a man, she's somehow deficient or she's being robbed of her, freedom and potentiality. When if we understand that God made us as two different types of beings who synthesize, and like you said, even all of these great men in history, they usually are synthesized in some way with a mom, a sister, a wife, even. Um, but a couple interesting questions that pop in my head here, in regards to figures, because what do you think of Joan of Arc? Do you see her? I kind of see her as a lunatic, but I'm
And
curious
I'm
what you
French.
think.
Don't go there, man. I'm French.
Well, that's
You'll
why I
get
thought it would be an
you'll get
interesting
a non
question,
you'll get
right?
a non-orthodox reaction from me with Joan of Arc. I have to say that I like her. But the reason, let's talk about it. Like, let's actually talk about this, because one of the things that happens, there are characters that appear in the history of the world that you could call exceptions, and there's a function for this exceptions in history. There's a reason why we have exceptional characters. But one of the things that happens in their story, and Joan of Arc is an example, is that she's presented as an exception. She's not presented as someone who is now here to change the social order. She kind of understands that because of this particular moment and this particular situation that's happening, that she is doing something that is not normal and is exceptional. And what the exceptional does, especially in storytelling, is that if it's properly framed, it also casts back the normality. It actually says, actually, no, this is not what women should be. This is not what women should do. Here's an example of someone who went completely out and did something completely strange and particular. And we understand it as strange and particular, but it also reflects back and shows us, what kind of normality is. And this is something that is there in our tradition, right? It's like we do not, most Christians do not believe that we should all live like Saint Simeon the Stylite. We see someone like Saint Simeon the Stylite in his absolutely extreme form of asceticism. We see that as this marker of a limit, that we kind of see as a limit, and it has a function in that way. So anyway, so that's what I would say. Obviously, it's hard for me because you know I'm not only French, man. I'm Quebecois. I'm surrounded by
I
English.
know.
We have to fight them off.
By the way, some people are taking issue with my usage of the word synthesize instead of synergize. It's not a big deal. Don't be word dorks over this. You can say that synthesize in the sense of the man and the woman come together as a kind of a whole. I'm not
The
talking.
baby,
I'm
the
not talking
baby is the
exactly.
synthesis, dude.
Thank you.
There is a,
So
what is the
people
synthesis? It's the
people
baby. The baby is the synthesis.
I don't know if you've noticed this. Maybe it's something that I've noticed because of so much debate over the last many years.
Mm.
Is that a lot of people really have a really hard time with words having flexibility, right? A
Yeah.
lot of people think that words can only have like a single referent. Words are very flexible, and it's the concepts behind the words, as St. Jerome said, that matter, not the terms themselves and getting sort of hung up on the terms. So, guys, have flexibility with language. Now,
Yeah, there should be like a generosity too. I think that, you know, there should be like a natural generosity. I think I saw you on a debate recently where you were answering the Redeem Zoomer stuff. Well, not a debate, but you were kind of answering the Redeem Zoomer stuff, and you talked about the filioque in the first centuries, and I thought you presented it really well. Is to say, when we encounter things like this, we should lead with a generous spirit and try to say, you know what, actually, I'm going to give them the time for me to understand what it is that's going on. And once I see what's behind it and I kind of understand that there is a heresy or there is a problem behind the terms that people are using, then we can be more strict. But I think it's better to lead with a generous spirit and to ask questions and to kind of understand to make sure that we're not just fighting to fight, like that we're actually trying to address the underlying issue.
absolutely. Guys, we're getting close to 1700, maybe up into 1800, almost to 2000. If you would hit like and share. We got quite a few super chats, so let me read a couple of those
Go for it.
while we are in a bit of a word miasma here. Novox, what's up? He's became a member. Adam says for $5. What is the symbolic meaning of BIPOC time? That's whenever I show up because I identify as a woman and specifically a woman of color. It's whenever I show up. That's what that means.
That's what it's about.
Rough
We can actually
hands.
talk about
Go
that.
ahead.
But it's a good idea to talk about the symbolism of this, which is
Sure.
that it is, you know, I think that especially now we're kind of a lot of people are able to see it. Is that we're reaching the end of the World War II consensus mythology, right? And so we realize that in some ways one of the things that are entailed by the end of World War II, and the things that it brought about, especially in the West, especially in North America, is a love of difference and exception, and that we understand difference as a kind of power, right? We see the Allies as this unaffiliated group of people that aren't completely aligned, but that nonetheless come together and defeat the Axis, right? Defeat the one vertical thing. And so, but that in some ways, there's a power in that, and it's not completely illegitimate. But now it's reached its like caricature where we basically worship exception and difference and oppression, and we worship all of these images. And so all of this stuff becomes all of the rainbow stuff is the final image of the World War II consensus kind of reaching its putrefaction.
Absolutely. Yeah. But we're also all equal too, right? So
Exactly.
somehow we're all the same, we're all equal, but also some are elite amongst the equal. Rough hands, what's up? He says, yo, let's go. Crutter says, I'm wearing my magic underwear for this stream. So he's referring to the song. By the way, shout out to whoever I forget the guy's name, the remix, Mr. Pulse, that remixed that. That was an awesome remix of the song. Appreciate that. Florent Labukin, $20. This is my favorite crossover. Greetings from Germany. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. I wish I remembered all my German that I took. I don't remember it, but I would say something. But Dirtpoor Robbins, $2. Jonathan's books are actually masterworks. I am not joking. I didn't think you were joking, Neil. And
That's pretty kind. Yeah.
exactly. Kelly Silva sends $10 and says, These are actually really beautiful books. Yeah, I agree. They're really high quality too. Like a lot of times publishers these days, you get, you order a book, you don't exactly know the quality of what you're getting, and they end up being subpar. These are actually really high quality. Like the pages, the covers, they're high quality. And for those of you who have voiced some complaints over the years about my books, well, guess what? Esoteric Hollywood 3 is now in color and it has high quality paper. It is not the
All
low
right.
quality paper. So if you're interested in the symbology and the deep state connections behind Hollywood and the films, I think if you like Pageau's work, you would also perhaps enjoy my trilogy, Esoteric Hollywood 1, 2, and 3. And you can get signed copies of that at my website, jaysanalysis.com. In the shop, if you go to the shop, don't get it from Jeffrey Bezos. He's taking everybody's money. He doesn't need any money. But we need money over here on our side of things. So get those books from jaysanalysis.com in the shop. And I have other books as well that deal with philosophy and theology. JP says for $5, a little woodland creature. Rolfing Steaks, $20. Does Jonathan Pageau have any view on anime? Is it idolatry? What is your take?
Whoa, is it idolatry? Uh, I actually have a great admiration for the Ghibli movies. I think that they're very beautiful, and there's a lot to get there. I mean, obviously you have to understand that there's some aspects of it that come from a different culture and that are referencing some strange things, but nonetheless, I really love those movies. I think they're very beautiful. In some ways, I think that Ghibli has been able to actually have female characters that aren't idiotic girl bosses and kind of ridiculous, that are both very feminine but can also be a main character in a story. I think that the West and Disney would learn a lot from that. Now, of course, what happened with anime is that, like, so much, there's so much of it that's completely degenerate. And so obviously you don't want to go in the degenerate stuff. Just like animation or any of pop culture thing, there's a scale, and so you obviously want to look towards those that are inspiring and that kind of have a glimpse of what is true in them. So that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, great question. Robert Baratheon's meaty Warhammer, $20. With figures like Saint Olga of Kiev or even Vlad the Impaler, how do we know where to draw the line with pragmatism? It seems sometimes to avoid a greater evil, heinous actions might be necessary, yet we don't want to lose our souls. This is a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I in some ways we need to pray for our leaders, for sure. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why St. Paul really emphasizes that, is that they're often faced with decisions that we would not want to have to make, and so they do have to make decisions that can sometimes compromise their own souls. And it is difficult. I mean, wars are messy, man. It's like war. There is no virtue. Like, there is no absolute virtue in war. There is. It's not that you can't be honorable in war. It's not like there isn't a possibility for warriors to, in some ways, exemplify self-sacrifice and honor and service to others. But it's very difficult, and that's why in the Orthodox tradition, soldiers can't just come back from war and commune. They have to go to confession. They often have penance, even though we understand the necessity of war, and we understand that it's a situation we're in, and we have to deal with these difficult things. That there is also an understanding that like you said, there often is. And if you think about it, like, I think the way that I see it in terms of bigger like states or larger structures is that there's a price to pay, right? And so if you have a cynical, pragmatic thing that you do, and you act on others, or there are things downstream from that. So if you do some if you try to, let's say, you try to create some regime change in another country, the idea that that's not going to come back and bite you is ridiculous. And then we're seeing it happen. We've seen it happen now since World War II. Is that let's say America's desire to try to control everybody else's country is ultimately then coming back as a kind of revenge on the
Absolutely.
nation. Yeah.
Amen.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So that's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Great comments. And great question. Right corner, $10. Pageau and Dyer. This is like float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, made
There
manifest.
you go. That's all. That's
Am I the
hilarious.
bee or the butterfly? I'm not
You're
sure.
definitely the
Like,
bee, Jay.
okay.
That's for sure.
So if you want to be a butterfly, okay, man,
I don't know if
that's
I want to be a butterfly, but I definitely know you're the one that stings. I often like I watch your debate sometimes. I'm like, man, I'm so happy that's not me. I'm also really happy it's happening, but I'm really happy it's not me because I wouldn't, I don't have that like tenacity that you have.
well, sometimes I get really sick of debates, and I say that all the
Yeah.
time, but then I end up right back in it. Like it's like the Godfather says, I tried to get out, and here they are pulling me back in. V Scott, $5. My child is a huge fan of Jonathan Pageau's fairy tales. The artwork is stunning, it is timeless, and it is cherished in our home. Thank you for all the work that you've done over the years, Jonathan.
Thanks. One of the things that it's important to understand is that I think you mentioned that a little bit is that we're going at this world class. Like I was not going to do this unless I could do it at a level that I wanted when I was a child. Like I wanted to do something that if I had been a child and I had had those books, I would have just absolutely loved them. And so, one of the great things that's going on is that, the entertainment industry is collapsing and all these people are getting canceled, all these people are leaving because they're just sick and tired of the nonsense. And so we've been able to get amazing artists, like just world-class artists. For example, for the fairy tales, Heather Pollington, she was a big designer for Disney and Harry Potter and all the big franchises. And through her own kind of life conversion story, moving to orthodoxy, she wanted to make something that was more meaningful and more beautiful. But she's top class. Those illustrations are really
Yeah,
amazing.
it's funny. This style of art, I don't exactly know how you would describe it, but it reminds me quite a bit of the old Disney version of Sleeping Beauty, which I'm a huge fan of that style of art. In fact, my wife bought me for Christmas that artist's own print that he did of
Wow.
it's the Sleeping Beauty style, but it's Mary and Jesus and Joseph going to Jerusalem, but in the style of Sleeping Beauty. So I really love this style of art. I'm also a huge fan of the sort of I don't even know what you would call it either, but if you get the older versions of the Narnia series, you get those sort of like pen sketches, and that style I like quite a bit because I grew up reading Narnia with that imagery, so it sort of burned into my head. And I think some of I think it was the Snow White kind of has some of that style.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a,
Yeah,
a way to explain what it is we're doing, you think you bringing up Sleeping Beauty is exactly right, which is that one of the things that makes us so attracted to Sleeping Beauty and the beauty and how amazing that animation was because Disney really went into the medieval style. That he really went
exactly.
into to stained glass structures and different structures of medieval manuscripts, and then tried to interpret it in an illustrative way to present this in the animation. So what we did is we said, can we do an Eastern version of that? Can we take some of the tropes of Orthodox iconography and some of the tropes of Byzantine stylization, and then without obviously being sacrilegious or doing something that would, betray, but rather try to give that flavor, right, in that sense. And so Heather, the artist, she's been studying now icon painting and is learning all the different tropes. And so we're trying to integrate that. And so the image that you showed of the woman lying down, if you know the image of the Dormition, you'll recognize, right, that it is a kind of hint. It hints at the Dormition and at the death of the mother. So those are the things that we're trying to integrate, especially in the certain of the books have that kind of style. And then the boys' books, like if you look at the Jack and the Beanstalk one, the Jack and the Fallen Giants, you'll see that it has more of that Narnia, 19th century kind of adventure style illustrations. Some of those really amazing books that you remember as a child. So yeah, we're really trying to. And like you said, the book, the quality of the print and the quality of with the debossed covers and the cloth covers with foiling and stuff, we're trying to make, we're going against the grain, trying not to make cheap throwaway stuff and making beautiful heirloom quality things.
Gravios, $10. Heavy is the crown, and too often the fool that ends up wearing it. I think he's referring to me when I went to Burger King. So I don't appreciate that, dude. Maranatha, $20. Can you explain that since icons depict hypostasis, could Christ not be depicted until his incarnation, even though his hypostasis appeared in the theophanies in the Old Testament, what do you think about using icons as your PFP? My opinion, I don't like when people use icons as their PFP. Maybe there is nothing inherently wrong with it, but also we've seen a pretty repeat pattern of the people that put icons as their PFP. They tend to be the worst people online. So um,
Yeah.
I would not do it. But could Christ not be depicted until his incarnation? Well, if you think about it, and I'll let Jonathan answer. I mean, the Old Testament texts, when they describe the theophanies, are a form of depiction, even though they're, textual depictions. Um, but I don't know exactly off the top of my head whether a Jew, for example, would have thought that you couldn't have like a burning bush or a cloud and a pillar. Perhaps the Dora Europos synagogue has that type of imagery. Jonathan, do you have any take on that?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of understand that it is definitely the incarnation of Christ, which in some ways reveals the truth about those texts. And therefore, it is true that before the incarnation of Christ, we don't have representations of Christ. Even though he's described, if you read the vision of Ezekiel, it's like the Son of Man that's being described sitting on the throne at the
Absolutely.
top of the dome of the cosmos. That's the same Son of Man that you see in the dome of your church in an Orthodox church. It is that image that he saw. But it is true that in some ways it was muddled. Like there wasn't a complete understanding of what that entailed. And it's only in the incarnation of Christ that then we can go back and see in the theophanies of the Old Testament the Christ being present. And that's why in the Christian tradition, we represent those theophanies often as Christ. We actually show Jesus Christ creating the world. When we show the creation of the world, we show Jesus Christ creating the world. When we show like I said, the vision of Ezekiel, will show Jesus Christ sitting on the throne. And in the burning bush, we'll show the mother of God and the Christ child. So there is no, and so in some ways because the incarnation is the anchor of history, we kind of have to understand it almost as being the origin, the true origin of reality, and that everything is interpreted through the incarnation. It even temporally it recasts the past. Well, not recast it, but actually reveals the fullness of the past in the incarnation. And so that's why you won't see in Judaism, at least if there are, we don't have any traces of them. You won't see images of the Son of Man until, but the Christians immediately understand that image to be the same. So if you look at images, early images of Christ, for example, if you look at the first images we have of the Ascension in like 6th century Rabula Gospels, you'll see that Christ has the cherubim under his feet as a chariot as he's ascending into heaven. And so the first Christian artists knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly that the prophetic tradition was leading up to the incarnation, and that the way we would represent the incarnation was in that line.
All right, we got a super chat from Maranatha. No, we did that one. Excuse me. Let's see. We got some more over here on Streamlabs. Lafferty Tristan, $10. The church fathers who comment on Daniel. No, we did that one before. Excuse me. Hooked on antiphonics. Antiphonics. Okay, $10. Christ is risen. I'm retired military. Thank you for steering me to the true church without taking a Roman Catholic detour. I began inquiring at Pascha. My wife and I were baptized into the local Antiochian church last Saturday. Well, many years, man. Glad to hear that. Hooked on antiphonics says for $56. This is very useful for your debate with Chase Geiser. Check this out. It's a critique of Masonry and the Gnostic influences on Freemasonry. Yes, guys, a reminder, in the show description, I have a link to this weekend's debate in Nashville. Live Saturday, we will be debating the topic of Freemasonry. Is it compatible or incompatible with being a Christian? And of course, Chase Geiser is a former InfoWars host, pretty well known on Twitter. So he will be taking the affirmative that you can be. I will be arguing the negative. No, you can't. Doesn't make any sense. It'd be like saying I'm a Christian Gnostic. It just doesn't make any sense. But That is this weekend. It's organized by two of Tucker's producers. So it's going to be a live event. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yes, they are going to live stream it. I think it's on DJ's channel, Crossroads or something like that. Whatever the name of the Instagram profile is that is DJ's thing. That will be where they stream it on YouTube. I just forget the name of the channel exactly. Panos says, no, excuse me, Hooked on Antiphonics again says, for $20, this contains errors, but B. Cooper's Mystery Babylon is worth revisiting. I'm not sure who he's about. William Cooper. William Cooper has an old kind of conspiracy lecture series. I don't know who B. Cooper is though, but thank you for the super chat. Pino says for $5. Jonathan, speaking of AI, what are your thoughts on the ideas that the later Plato, who held that forms are actually more akin to number rather than a vague likeness of a things, that all things are being participated in?
Not sure I completely understand the question. That
Let me read it again. Okay, speaking of AI, what are your thoughts on the ideas of later Plato, who held that forms are more akin to number rather than likeness, that all relevant beings participate in? What's your thoughts
Okay.
on? Yeah.
I mean, I think that for sure this is related to AI, which is that AI functions almost exclusively on prediction and proportion, right? In the sense that the AIs measure the distance between words in our discourse, and that is how they are able to predict what to say. And so there is definitely something, there is a deep mathematical structure. And so there is some, I think that there is something of about the the patterns of reality which are related to number, in the sense that they are proportionalities, right? They are relations of proportionalities. But there's also something else, because I think that there is the purposes of things, which that's why I think that Christian metaphysics is superior to the Platonic ones. When you get Saint Maximus, who talks about the logi, he's talking about the reasons for things, like that there are deep reasons for things in the mind of God, and those reasons then manifest themselves into these different things in the world. Uh, to me, that is actually a much better approach to the forms, and it's one that is happens to jive very well with a lot of the new science and like the cog sci stuff, which is that they realize that even humans don't perceive things, they perceive purposes. That when we look at something, we see the reason, or we try to guess what the reason for something is in the world, and that is how actually our ontology is constructed as we experience the world. And so to me, that's a far superior way of looking at I like to hear what you think, Jay.
I think that, and Pano and I have, we've had quite a few conversations in the past. I think that number is akin to abstraction in the sense of the structure that God created for the world. So there's
Mhm.
uncreated logi, according to St. Maximus. And then on the basis of the uncreated logi, there are created universals that are the structure of the natural world. And the logic, so to speak, of the natural world. So there's a both and there. A lot of times people, I'm not
Mhm.
saying Panos is doing this, but a lot of times people will confuse the logi with universals. And Maximus says universals are created, the logi are not. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I
so
probably do that. I probably do that myself.
Okay, I wasn't referring to you. I'm just saying, speaking in general, in terms
Yeah.
of Platonism. A lot of Platonists will say that, uh, and make that confusion. But um, I think that Pano is correct that the later Plato probably did sort of move in that direction, and I think that is an earlier precedence for AI and the worldview that you get out of these philosophers and thinkers. Because, for example, by the time of Leibniz, he's using a lot of Platonic ideas and Neoplatonic ideas when he comes up with the idea of a numeric structure for reality that he calls the characteristica universalis. And that universal characteristic, where all reality is seen as quantified mathematically, is literally the basis for computers. So I think you're
Mhm.
absolutely spot on if you look at Leibniz. Icon says for $5, Jonathan Pageau brought me to church. Jay girded me for theology. God bless you both. Well, hey, man, I appreciate that. That was really kind of you.
Yeah.
Um, Now we got, let's see, I don't want to keep Jonathan too long. I don't know what his time frame is like, but uh, there's a couple more here at the bottom. Let me see. My computer's all slowing down here.
I'm not in a hurry. It's up to you.
Okay. Demagogue says for $10, Jay and Jonathan are goats. Question, hopefully not at the left hand on Judgment Day. But what does Jonathan think of Jay saying that Tolkien's elves have secret society? And no, let me be clear what I said about that. I'm not saying that Tolkien is saying that the elves are a secret society intelligence network. I'm saying that it's like the way that Tolkien, this is my theory, my opinion, because Tolkien did have a year where he worked in intelligence. He was working at Bletchley Park, which was the code breaking section of British intelligence in World War II. So my theory is that things that he learned when he was doing intelligence training applied to the world of the Lord of the Rings. I'm not saying that the elves represent the secret handlers of British intelligence, but that's what I was saying.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to hear like the full argument, but I think that. So let's talk. I mean, this is actually probably an interesting way to talk, interesting moment to talk about secrecy, or the idea of the secret. Because there are aspects of the secret which are that are not only legitimate but are completely necessary for reality to live. That's why we, in some ways, have the altar, in some ways removed from the nave. That's why the priest has silent prayers. That's why there is an aspect of mystery that's related to secrecy, not in the sense of hiding it from others, but in the sense of something which can't be completely contained, in discourse, and therefore has to be expressed as a mystery, and there's a kind of secret to that. And that's very different from the secret in the sense of hiding things from others in order to manipulate them, right?
You
Or
talking about
hiding it from
Oprah's secret? You talking about Oprah, the secret?
yes, something like that. That's what I'm talking about. Definitely.
That's
But you
that.
see what I'm
You know what
saying?
I'm talking
Like,
about? That, that stupid book, that New Age
yeah,
book.
the
Yeah,
the
I'm
the, the
joking,
like
but
manifesting the idea that you can, yeah. But I think that maybe there's something about the elves which in some ways they represent some like a people from the other side. Like there's an angelic aspect to the elves, and that in some ways they bring that mystery into the world, and so there is that type of secret to them. But I don't know if that's the same. So like the idea of secret influence, for example, like in the story of Pilate and his wife has a secret influence on him, right? But it's like a deep secret influence that is there to kind of guide him towards the right path. But that is different from the idea of manipulation through lies and through secrets and through hiding facts from people so that they don't know what's actually going on.
now for reference here, I'm going to put in the chat. There's an article at GCHQ, which is the British version of the NSA, and you'll notice here they discuss Tolkien's work at Bletchley Park in intelligence. Wired
Mm.
magazine has had essays on this, for articles on this, for many, many years. Tolkien was handpicked to study ciphers and cryptography. So
Okay.
I'm not saying these things. I'm not responding to you, Jonathan. I'm saying to the person that asked me that. I'm not saying these things like just pulling it out of my butt, like, oh, some wild tinfoil hat theory. I'm saying that because he studied intelligent stuff, he would have applied some of the things that he learned to the world of Lord of the Rings. And that's why Gandalf functions kind of like a good version of a Henry Kissinger, right? Gandalf is in the background as a handler, sort of planning out the big scale operation to
Yeah.
dupe Sauron by sending in two hobbits, which he would have expected that two little, humble hobbits would be the downfall by bringing the ring into, Mount Doom. So that's what I was theorizing.
Yeah.
Now let's go to next super chat is Tuxedo Mask says, this is people are getting hardcore here. Gandalf, Aragorn, and Frodo or the Trinity. I don't know about that.
Oof.
Tuxedo Mask, the elves represent Black America. Okay, he's trolling. He thinks the elves represent Black people. That's funny. He's being silly. We got some more big super chats here. I'm trying to go fast here. Let's see. Peter says for 129 bizarre currencies I've never heard of. What significance does the Soviet Union have as modern Babylon? Habakkuk says that there's a prophecy of wicked, hasty nation. This is the USSR. I don't think Habakkuk is talking about the USSR, and the USSR doesn't exist. The Soviet Union's gone. I think you could say that the ethos of the USSR was a beast type of system
Yeah,
or a
for sure.
Babylon, but so has the West become a Babylon beast system as well. Any thoughts on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that we have to, when we read the when we see the horror on the back of the beast, the characteristics it has, it's a the beast has a communistic aspect to it. You can understand like the system, but the horror also is just clearly has capitalistic aspects to it, right? It's
Amen.
like it's about trade and pleasure and getting what you desire. And so the Bible doesn't care about your politics, man. The Bible is trying to show the disease of the end, and what the disease of the end is. And it's not like, if you think that your capitalism is going to be the one that Jesus chooses. Yeah, I don't. That's just not. Neither of those are interesting to what the true kingdom is like. And so I see both. And when I look at the Horror and the Beast, I see images or a smell of communism and capitalism at the same time. But it's true that at least in the structure of Revelation, the beast kills the whore at some point. So it is possible that these systems of control that are more kind of globalist, communist like will ultimately clamp down on the free market aspect of our society. We saw a little bit of that during COVID, like what could be possible. So it seems like that could definitely be possible. Dude, you're muted.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I was like, I can't hear anything. What's going on? It's like, sorry, it took me a while to say it. I was like, is it my thing? And like, no, you've been muted for a while
No,
there.
it's just I have to ride their mute button with my using Apple products. It's the way it's set up. But Hush Tones $5. Well, who peed in that Pete B guy's cereal and X? You pointed out he was misrepresenting a position on the Iran war and he freaked out. What the heck? Yeah, I mean, I pointed out that Pope Leo, in my view, is not a good Christian leader merely because he's anti-war. I agree with being opposed to the Iran war position. I've done about 40 podcasts in the last year in opposition to Trump's position and actions. But that's different from what we was discussing earlier with Jonathan. The idea that sometimes you do have to engage in defensive warfare. It's a unfortunate necessity of this life, and the church has always sort of taken account of that. And at Nicaea, for example, the canons state that it's not antithetical to Christianity to be a soldier, but it's not ideal, and we have to go to communion after warfare, that kind of stuff. We have to do a certain time of penance and so forth. So that's what I pointed out, and this guy just lost his mind and cussed me out for literally for no reason. I was always been totally nice to this guy. I've always been respectful, appreciated his takes, and he just seemed to lose it today. Maybe he's having a bad day. I'm trying to go. I don't want to. Baby Be My $10. Remember the atheist goober who had to Google the word epistemology? Yeah, in fact, that was the guy that both Jonathan and I ended up having a sort of debate with.
Oh, that guy?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. When I saw that he went on your channel, I'm like, I hope it's not because you saw that he talked to me, because that was
No, I
such
didn't
a
know.
frustrating,
No idea
such a
who.
frustrating conversation.
I had no idea who that guy was. He just sort of popped up. It was clear in
I
the
didn't.
debate.
He kind of tricked me into a conversation, and while in the conversation, I'm like, "What is happening? This guy is a complete moron."
Yeah, well, the commenter here says it was clear that this guy wanted to debate and trap Jonathan, but he framed it as a conversation and then came to cope after he lost to both of you guys.
Yeah.
He also got a spanking from Father Deacon Dr. Ananias. I didn't know that. That's funny. Hush Tones $5. You guys are the best at what you do. Totally different ends of the spectrum. It's the TISM spectrum or the apologetic spectrum. You decide. Well, one thing I'll say to that, and I'll let Jonathan reply too, is people think that the majority of what I do is like super hyper analytical. I was Dr. Bo Branson is a super analytical minded person who can sort of step into apologetics. My whole ethos is actually pretty right brained. I mean, I can do the analytical stuff, but I find it very technical and boring. So I would actually say I'm a little more on the right brain side of things, and I
Mm.
think probably Jonathan is as well. But that might surprise you given debates. But I don't. I actually, I have a lot more fun, doing comedy or writing for Sam Hyde than arguing with a yet another cult leader like we did last night with the black guys. So, Jonathan, any thoughts on the different spectrums between apologetics and sort of right wing creativity,
Yeah. I mean,
right brain creativity?
yeah,
Excuse me.
right brain. I mean, I don't know if I think that for me, it's actually more of like there's a personality thing. You know, I think that if to be able to debate, you have to be able to really hold the line, right? And in some ways not let the personal kind of enter into the discussion. And I see that, at least I see that Jay does it really well. Like, sometimes I can see him, he just like, no, I'm not gonna give you this inch because I know what it entails, and so I'm just not going to. I'm just like sometimes I'm just, how can I say this? Like, I think I'm too much of a nice guy, not in a positive way. I just struggle to do that. I wouldn't be able to kind of just hold on, and so for that reason, sometimes I get some of the moments where I've had a more debate type conversations. When I listen to it later, I kind of say, "Oh man, I should have said this. I should have said that." Like, I didn't see where it was going. I didn't have that kind of strategic planning vision, and so I think there's a part of it that's also like a kind of personality thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Wake says for $50, Christ is risen, indeed he is. Many years. What contemporary saints or elders stand out to you both personally? Well, personally, because I'm a longtime theology book guy. I'm definitely into Father Demetrius Staniloy. I read most of Father Seraphim Rose's works, and so most recent saints, those would come to mind for me. And I know that technically Father Seraphim Rose is perhaps not fully received everywhere as a saint, but I think he kind of is. But Father Jonathan, Jonathan, do you have any comments on contemporary saints and elders?
Yeah, I think that yeah, I would say the same. I'm sadly not as, how can I say this? Like, I'm not as knowledgeable of the contemporary saints. Like, I kind of know a little bit about their lives, but I probably should know more. And so sadly, I don't necessarily have that much of an opinion.
Let's see. Henry, thank you for the $2. No comment. Adam says for $2, I think you missed my super chat about Saint Dennis. Okay, let me go back up. Phantasm, thank you for that super chat. Okay, no, that's his BIPOC comment. Let me see if it's over here. Let's see. No, we did that one. We did that one. I'm trying to figure it out where I'm at, but thank you guys for your patience here. Let's see. Let's see. We did that. Adam says for $5, how do you see the differences between Catholic and Orthodox so-called contemplative practices and monasticism? And what do you think of bridal mysticism? I'll let Jonathan answer that.
I don't think I know enough about Catholic mysticism, to be honest. What is the bridal mysticism? Is that I don't think,
I mean, I
sadly, I
assume
don't
he's
think I
just
know enough.
talking about like Song of Solomon, or like how would you read like the Song of Solomon from your perspective?
I mean, I think that for sure the Eastern Fathers also interpret the Song of Solomon as a relationship between God and the soul. Saint Gregory of Nyssa famously wrote a whole commentary on the Song of Songs. So I think that that's completely fine. But I think that for sure I mean, maybe that's one thing I can say is that I think that there is a there definitely is especially in like later saints, you see a almost erotic like aspect to, if you look at Teresa of
Correct.
Avila and these saints, there's a kind of erotic aspect to Catholic mysticism that definitely is not there in the East. At least I don't know any traces of it. So I would say that's definitely a difference, and it seems to be reflected in general in Catholic aesthetics with the Baroque and this kind of very luscious and almost sensuous aspect of reality. For sure, in Eastern mysticism, it's about the nous and about the vision of the uncreated light. So.
Okay, I found your question, Adam. It says, for $5, what is the deal with later French traditions on the martyrdom of Saint Denis?
Oh, you mean about the head? About him being able to carry his own head? That's probably what he means. There's definitely this famous tradition that when Saint Denis was his head he was decapitated, and that he picked up his own head and basically left with his head, and was buried. So I kind of like those traditions. I don't really have a problem with that. I think for sure there is there's something I think about. There's like a deep symbolic thing going on in terms of what Dionysius is to hierarchy, right? In the sense that his great gift to Christianity was to be able to formulate an ontological hierarchy, and a kind of metaphysics that accounted for really for a Christian view of the world. And so to me, when you read that his head would have been cut off and that he would have taken his head, been able to take his own head, to me that is in some ways this image of a restoration of the hierarchy. You can't do that to him. Like you can't remove his head. He'll bring it together. So I mean, might seem a bit silly, but I do think that sometimes these traditions, they reflect something true about the person.
Tuxedo Mouse, Lothlorien is Wakanda. He's still trolling. Wolf is slick, $10. I'm a lifelong agnostic, but I think there's a creator. You two have put me on the path of considering orthodoxy. You guys have brilliant minds. Thank you for your efforts. Appreciate your kind comments, Wolf Slick, and hopefully you check out liturgy and check out the church. Iron Giant, $5. Jonathan, I want to thank you for coming to Holy Cross.
Yeah, that was a while ago. It was wonderful. I got to meet with Timothy Petitza. I think it was actually the first time that I met him in person, and so it was nice. It was a good time. I want to say so. I realize now that when you asked me about my favorite contemporary saint, I realized that the Symbolic World, we do have a patron saint of the Symbolic World, which is a recent saint, which is Saint Nikolai Velimirovich, who died at Saint Tikhon's, and he wrote this beautiful little book on what is it, the cosmos as sign and symbol, something like that. And so he kind of opened the path for what it is we're doing, which is to show that symbolism isn't just abstraction. It's actually the way the world was actually created was through.
I lost you just for a second. Sometimes on Streamlabs OBS, the collab cam will cut out. Go ahead and finish your comment there about your patron.
Yeah, I was saying, I don't know if I was able to finish about Saint Nikolai Velimirovich and how he wrote that little book called, I think it's The Cosmos as Sign and Symbol, something like that, which in some ways opened up the space to talk about symbolism not as abstraction and not also as psychic projection, which is what you see in Jung, but rather as the actual underlying structure of how God created the world, through love. So he's really our patron.
E.G. Nitec, $10. Is an argument from consensus always a fallacy? If you're trying to argue that it's a proof, yes, you could argue that it's an attestation to the likelihood of a position being true. For example, you could say something like, here's a piece of evidence, which is that let's say you're in a court case and you've got, 10, I don't know, biologists or 10 DNA specialists, and they've said, hey, 9 of the 10 DNA specialists agree this guy is the guy that committed the murder. That would be a strong piece of evidence, but they don't function it doesn't function as a strict logical proof because the consensus can be wrong. Is the Orthodox argument that the Protestant canon is uh, theirs was from a universal consensus before the schism? So this is two different lines of argumentation. We're not arguing that the canon is true because there's some large number of consensus. We're arguing that there's an authority that the church has to determine that. So it actually has nothing to do with it's true because of consensus. Now, the church fathers might have utilized a majority type of argumentation in figuring out what the consensus was, but it is not true because of consensus. It's just, again, part of the line of argumentation that you would see perhaps at Trullo, or when Trullo refers to the Carthaginian canons. Luis, $5. Jonathan, I don't mean to cut you off, Jonathan. If you want to comment,
No
feel
worries, no
free. Luis
No, no,
says,
no.
Jonathan, I bought your coloring book for my Protestant niece, but it scared my mom.
Dude, for your Protestant niece, there's like there are definitely things in there that Protestants would be scared of.
It scared his
So
mom. Don't give coloring books to your mom, dude. That's lesson number one.
there you go. There you go.
Gian sends $20 and says, if Peter has double symbolism, is it not reasonable to say that where Peter is and where he plants seeds, even where there's the possibility of it manifesting on Satan's side? I'll be honest with you, I don't
I was
understand.
referring to things that I've talked about in the past, which is
Oh, okay.
that I have intimated that when you align yourself with a principality, like if you align yourself with a certain principle, then you'll be, if you become in some ways an aspect of their body, it's just a way of talking about like a projection of them, that it is not unreasonable to see that in some ways the Catholic Church, because it sees itself as being under St. Peter, that it would have both his qualities and his faults. And I
Oh,
think that I
interesting.
see that in the story of the Catholic Church, which is that this tendency towards pride, which then result in a kind of sinking, right? So you have these kind
Interesting.
of two aspects of. So if you look at papal infallibility, you can imagine papal infallibility as St. Peter walking out on the water and being like, I'm the one, and then
Wow.
ultimately Vatican II comes immediately after. And you see that also in the if you see the text where Christ says, "Get behind me, Satan," 2 verses before, right, is when Christ says, "You are Peter, and on this stone I will build my church." And then Christ says, "I need to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to die." And Peter's like, "No, no. Like, well, stop it, right? We can do it. We can stop it." And that's when Christ turns and said, "Get behind me, Satan." And so I think that there's a lot of qualities of the Catholic strength and weakness that is in the character of St. Peter in Scripture.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. That's fascinating that the institution itself might embody the bad qualities as well. Coop, $2. Skyline chili, yes or no? I think it's gross. I don't know why anybody would put cinnamon and sugar in their chili. It's disgusting. Let's see. I'm gonna go through these pretty quick here. Jay, you skipped my super chat earlier about your book. All right, well, I'll try to find it. Palm Beach Pete, $38. Can priestly ordination in the Orthodox Church be revoked? I mean, you can be defrocked. Is it an unremovable sacrament that can be suspended? I don't think we have the Roman Catholic view. The Roman Catholic attitude is ex opere operato, like you're never a priest, and that's why they think that even if you get ordained as a priest and the next day you become a Satanist and reject the Roman Catholic Church, you're still a priest and you can still forever confect the Eucharist all you want. I've never heard anything like that from the Orthodox perspective. Um, Leather sends $1. I read about the Islamic end times prophecy and the Mahdi. Funny thing, the Pope and the Muslims are coming together. It could be a sign of the end times. Kako John, $10. Kako Janius, Christ is risen, indeed he is. Greetings from Georgia. I wish you guys all the best. Jay and Jonathan, have you guys been discussed on Mount Athos? I'm sure, somebody sent me a video of people using my Catholic apologetics. They were using it in a course, teaching a course at Athos. So I would imagine, not bragging, I'm just saying that, yeah, that's a fact. Thank you guys. You guys would love Athos. Regarding Father Seraphim Rose, he is locally canonized in Georgia. Yeah, I understand. I just meant that he's not yet accepted everywhere, so technically no. But Louis, um, what's the role of art in theology? For example, St. Gregory the Theologian's poetry prior to Constantinople I, or the Psalms being the most quoted book in the New Testament? I'll let Jonathan answer.
Yeah, I think that there are different aspects of theology. Like if you understand theology as prayer, like in the sense of, speaking with God or speaking to God, then for sure poetry is a deep aspect of theology. It's very important. And in some ways, I think that the artistic, I mean, I wouldn't use the word artistic, but that the expression, the worship, the poetry of the church precedes the theology in the sense of the more analytic side of theology, which is like the definitions and the description. And so that's kind of how I understand it. And so obviously the art of the church is more related to the actual worship. Usually that's the psalms or the poems are offerings to God.
Two Frey, 123 Frey, $2. Thank you for leaving me orthodoxy. Pablo says, Pageau, what do you think about Genesis and historicity?
What is that? I don't understand the meaning of that question. What does he mean?
In terms of like theistic evolution.
Oh, I how can I say it? I think that Genesis 1 is the best description of the origin of the world that is possible. I don't think that anything ever comes close to it. Um and But I also don't think that it's a scientific description, and I don't think it has to be, and I don't think it wants to be that. And so to me that's kind of where I draw the line in that sense, which is that I think that we need to see the Bible as the source of our understanding, and not see history and the categories of history and the categories of science as the source of our understanding. When we inverse it, then things become weird because the text isn't using those categories. And so, for example, if you take modern historiography as your baseline, then when you read Genesis, it's like it doesn't have what you want it to have. It doesn't have the elements that you would need it to have to be considered history by some like 21st century secular historian. But I do think that it actually has deeper categories that also do include history in the broad sense, but don't necessarily need to conform to whatever modern criteria we use. So I kind of tend to invert the whole question, which is I see the Bible as the source of meaning and the source of history and the source of how we understand things. And then I kind of leave the rest lay where it lays. I think that some of the categories that biologists use are totally fine. They don't bother me as long as they don't try to tell me that I come from apes, which is like, I definitely don't come from apes. I come from God. Like, what kind of nonsense? Like, why would you posit the origin of humans that way? Uh, you know, and so, but I do think that, let's say, if you want to show that there's a relationship between humans and other animals, of course there is, and you can definitely show that our bodies are made in the same ways as animals, and you can show the relationship, and these are relevant and can be interesting in their own context.
Amelia on $20. Jay, thank you for clarifying the text for me a couple days ago. Christ has risen. Yeah, man, anytime. Wake says, no, I'm sorry. Bear Shinobi, $5. Do Jay or Jonathan have any take on Trump's AI generated Dr. Jesus portrait? Yeah, I think it was blasphemous. I don't know what Jonathan thinks.
Man, yeah, I have to say that your administration has been going hard in the past few days. Did you see also the Hegseth Pulp Fiction prayer?
I saw that today. Yeah, that was funny.
My goodness, what is happening? It's like it's falling apart. I have to say that, I don't know. I'm not American, so I usually try not to talk about this too much. But for sure, I would have voted for Trump 100% if I was American. But a lot of the stuff I'm seeing recently, especially since the war in Iran, and a lot of the compromises that seem to be being made, it's becoming very difficult to continue to kind of follow along with what's going on. So, I don't totally understand what the hell's going on. Like, what exactly is it that's happening? But for sure there's something strange. And I think that also as Christians, we have to understand, I mean, I don't want to judge his soul, but I don't think Donald Trump is a Christian. I don't think that he really even portrays himself as a Christian. And so we shouldn't be, we should know what it is that we ask for, right? It's like, obviously politics is a world of compromise. We understand that. And so if I say I would have voted for Trump rather than Kamala, and then I'm totally insanely shocked that he doesn't act like a Christian, it's like, well, I can say that it's wrong, but I shouldn't be like shocked. But I have to say that right now, the Hegseth thing, really, I don't even know what to think about the Hegseth thing, because I thought at least he was some kind of Christian, some kind of, what is it, non-denominational or whatever he is. But man, how can this? He said, did you see? He says, "Pray along with me." He says, "Pray along with me."
Yeah, I think
Then
these,
he says this insane blasphemous thing.
yeah, this is why we've got this is that whole, evangelical fundamentalist mindset based around, end times dispensational stuff that's had a hold on the American so-called conservative and right wing for so long. And that's why in the last 2 years, I've spent a massive amount of time trying to argue against Christian dispensationalism and Christian Zionism, because it's such a huge stranglehold. GM sends $200. Wow, thank you. That's a
Whoa.
big fat super chat. He won the super chats by far tonight. GM says, I was hoping this collab would happen, hoping it would come back around, and it did. Thank you so much, man, for that big fat super chat. EG says again for $2. How is Jordan Peterson doing? Well, EG, if you go back to the beginning of the stream, we answered that. Jonathan gave us an update earlier, so scroll back from the beginning and you'll see that. Vantio says for 10 weird currencies, is it reasonable for a Catholic to stay Catholic if he wants to seek to cultivate the good side of Peter from within? No, that's not the Orthodox perspective. So you might have good intentions, but you have to understand that the Roman Catholic Church doesn't function around the lay people's intentionality. It functions around the dogma and the magisterial teaching. And so Vatican I has dogmatized the autocratic position of the Roman bishop in terms of infallibility, and it absolutely has. You're not going to be able to change the dogma from within. It's just not the way the system works. So that's my take. If Jonathan wants to comment, he can feel free.
Yeah, I would say no. I do believe that ultimately the best thing is to become Orthodox. Like that's the best thing for your soul. I'm kind of I tend to be, and I mean Jay probably you disagree with me on this, but I tend to be a practical in some extent, which is that I have encountered people that live 1,000 miles from an Orthodox church, and they ask me, well, should I leave the Catholic Church? And I'm like, well, probably not, because it's probably still better to go to a Catholic church than to sit at home and not participate at all in any kind of community that at least recognizes Christ. So even though there are heresies and there are, things that are wrong about the church, I tend to not encourage people to end up alone. But anyway, that's kind of my more practical, like it's a kind of economia approach to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would disagree there, but we don't have to go into that right now. It's
Yeah,
not the subject of our chat. And no, this is not the place for you guys in the chat to try to stoke some sort of debate or argument. We're not going to have that right now. Wolf Slick, $10 for both of you guys. Is there any Orthodox position that you find more difficult to debate or to discuss with skeptics? If you were to debate yourself, what's a point that you would press? I mean, the difficulty oftentimes I think comes with the conveying the ideas, especially their kind of technical, difficult ideas, to an audience or to a person who doesn't know or believe our system. So you have to kind of do a lot of legwork, trying to explain terms. And usually that's the most difficult part. But I would say probably, and I think FDA would agree, like in terms of debate, the problem of evil probably is the most, challenging, so to speak, or the most difficult one. And if I was to debate myself from the opposite position, I would say probably a problem of evil argument is the strongest that they have. Jonathan, would you like to comment on what you see as a difficulty conveying to skeptics or to a Brett Weinstein or somebody like that?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's mostly about there's something that has to do with intuition. Like there seems to be a noetic thing that needs to happen, and my experience is that sometimes in a discussion, unless that happens, unless there's a kind of moment of actual intuition of something, then the arguments go around in circle at some point. Because if you can't, for example, understand vertical causalities, or you don't understand that there are types of causalities that are not captured only by things bumping into each other at the mechanical level, then at some point you just end up kind of just running around in circles, and I get frustrated. It's actually one of the reasons why I don't do debates, is because I've had some, you can find on my channel where I've had discussions with like rationality rules and these kinds of people, and if you knew me, you would see that I'm getting very frustrated. I'm getting very angry inside, because I'm like, I see that this is going nowhere, and that, there's a basic thing that is not being understood, and therefore there's like a wall. I can't communicate across that wall. And so, yeah, I don't know how to fix that,
And what's the strongest argument that you would use against yourself? This guy asked.
Oh, what's the strongest argument that I would use against myself in that case? Uh, I mean, if I was arguing, for sure, if I was arguing myself on something like the idea of vertical causality, and the idea that there are, that there are these formal causes, or whatever, however you want to phrase it, I would just hold on to my, because the thing is that you can always point to the mechanical aspects of reality. You can always say the parts, the parts, the parts. And there is a trick there where it feels like it's sufficient to some extent. And so I would probably do the same they're doing, and just kind of just hold on, just like bite onto that, to that mechanical world, and keep showing it. Uh, you know. But I think that for sure, like the problem of evil, you see it. This is one of the things that I see. I mean, I think I told you guys when I saw you at dinner the other day that I really wish that you or Andrew would get to debate Alex O'Connor, because he always uses that argument, right? But he always uses it. He goes on the attack so much that the person is never able to just show the mirror, to like just to point the mirror back and say, "Well, you have no way of arguing around this either. Like you have no argument. Like you keep telling us, why is it that Christians had slaves? But I mean, what is your like deep ontological
Right.
structure that gets you to understand why we shouldn't have slaves?" Like he just goes on the attack, and I'm like, we need someone that just won't take it, and just will just like,
Well, that was this close to happening. So I was supposed to debate him, just me and O'Connor, for 1 hour on Pierce Morgan, and that was right around the time that O'Connor had done this interaction with John Lennox where he didn't do too well, and he sort of backed out of it and said, "No, I'm going to not debate theology or Christianity anymore." So I was so close to having that Alex O'Connor discussion that I've been wanting for so many years, and that's right when he backed out. And I'm not saying he backed out because of me. I don't know, but I actually think it was probably because he was starting to.
John Lennox, maybe
Yeah, I
he
think it was
felt
starting
like.
to feel like, yeah, his Linux debate didn't go too well. JML, $20. I was listening to a Catholic exorcist, and he said that he knows that the demon Asmodeus possesses Skittles men. Why would the Catholic Church then give their priesthood to demons? Well, I think that's a little much. I don't know that every Skittles dude is possessed by the demon Asmodeus, but just simply put, I don't think that they have very high standards for who goes into seminary. I know that because I used to be in the Roman Catholic Church, and I was in that world. I spoke to spiritual advisors about going into monastic life in the Roman Catholic world, and they pretty much told me, most guys are homosexual here, so just need to understand that. That kept me away.
Whoa,
So yeah, they were very open at the.
straight up. They just
They
said
were
it
open.
straight
I
up.
mean, the diocese was quite open about it. My priest, who was actually a conservative Roman Catholic priest, not a full on trad cat, but not pro Skittles. He was very open about that too. He's like, well, a lot of these guys are gay. You might not do that well if you go into the Dominican order or something like that. So I just think they have very lax standards on who they allow into to seminary. Cholo Mexicano, $10. God's dog that Jonathan put out looks like a story that I can vibe with. It's a straight up gangster status story. We are all cholo out here in the streets. I think it definitely would appeal to cholos. Would this appeal to Hey, Jonathan, bro, like, would you totally say that like this book would appeal to cholos or whatever, or would it like barely make it?
For sure, the God's dog one. It's definitely there is definitely a kind of gangster thing about it, and as the story goes on, it's actually gonna be like a massive epic. We have 2 books, but it's gonna be 5 books. And it's going to culminate in a giant like war against Jerusalem, with giants and leviathans and centaurs and Amazons and like everything in the ancient world, basically, coming together against Jerusalem.
Giovanni, I found your other super chat. You said for $5. Hey, you a black queen. I just want to let you know that recently in a live stream, I sent a super chat to a YouTuber in the channel called Real Life Fake Wizard. I recommended your book, Stark Hollywood, to him because it relates to what he talks about. He said he will be checking it out. Appreciate that, man. Very cool. Appreciate you promoting the book. Maranatha, $20. Can you explain? No, we did that one. Excuse me. That's the one we did. Okay, I think I've gotten to these. Ethan says for $5. We got a last couple here, and I'll let Jonathan go because I'm sure he's got other things.
Yeah, I'll probably go around 5.
Yeah, last couple questions here. Ethan says for $5. By the way, guys, I will do a separate stream. I do feel like streaming today, given this guy flipping out and cussing me out. So I'm not just going to stream about that, but we'll stream about different topics that I didn't get to last time. Ethan says, how do we deal with bad clergy? What's our method of advice? What's our method of getting advice from different clergy? Well, I would say if they're bad in an extreme sense, avoid them, and you can absolutely get advice from different clergy. Jonathan?
Yeah, of course. There is no in the Orthodox Church. There is not this idea that you absolutely have to go to certain people for confession or for advice. You can receive the sacrament from a priest, even though you know that they'll give you bad advice. You should find a confessor that is a virtuous man, that is a holy person, and so that is completely acceptable. And if the behavior is one which is immoral and is heretical, then there are ways to do that. Like I think that it's okay to address that, with the clergy around them, ultimately with the priest himself, and then ultimately with the bishop. You have to be careful because you have to, it's going to cost you. Like if you're going to go after clergy, that has a cost, and you have to make sure that this is serious, or else it's going to turn against you if you try to go after clergy, for reasons that are not they're not sufficient. But obviously, there are mechanisms in the church to be able to denounce and to not get rid of, but at least call attention to clergy that is acting in immoral or heretical ways.
Porphyry says for $50. Thank you. Another big fat super chat. Christ is risen. Indeed he is. Thank you for all your work. Both of you guys helping us read and interpret the modern world. Any response to that, Jonathan?
Thanks. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think I saw Jay last time, I told him, we and I've said this a few times to him, it's like in some ways we're really in different, like we're kind of in these different camps that are acting in different places. And so, I think that the type of thing that I'm doing, I love what I'm doing and I'm happy to do that. And I think it has a function, but I also think that this more, this kind of on the front line, we need people on the front lines also, doing that work. And so I think we're both playing our role.
Ryan, thank you so much. Became a member. Guys, we're not going to be able to get to every one of these little $2 super chats about really in-depth theological questions. I know you guys want to ask Jonathan all your big, deep questions for $2 and $1, but guess what? That's what the Symbolic World Conference is for. You can go meet Jonathan. You can get the books. You can get them signed and ask those types of questions there. And the link for the conference and the tickets is in the show description. Let's see. We'll do one last one, and we'll let Jonathan go here. Let's see who gave the fattest one here. In the Filth, $10 says, is there any significance to Christ grabbing Adam and Eve's wrists in the harrowing of Hades icon? Why didn't he grab their hands? And this reminds me of someone perhaps grabbing in haste.
Yeah, no, this is really actually an important aspect of the iconography. And the reason why Christ grabs the wrist is to show that this is only due to Christ. That is, it is not Adam's will. He's not self-willing himself into resurrection, that it is really Christ coming to get him. Sometimes you'll see in some icons, they'll actually make the wrist limp. They'll actually give him like a limp wrist, so to show that this is a dead person that Christ is coming to save. And so I think the danger, obviously some icons you'll see him grabbing the hand. It's okay too. There are variations, but when you see Christ grabbing the wrist, it's to emphasize the fact that all of the action is coming from Christ, and it's not Adam that's self-willing himself into resurrection.
All right, we got one last one because Jamar sent $20. Jonathan, is there an age group or an age that is appropriate for kids to start looking at your books?
Well, I mean, the fairy tales are really for the youngest of the young kids. That depends on their attention, their capacity for attention. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The I would say the graphic novels around 10 years old probably depends on your kids, but also teenagers. There's it's more of an adventure, but it's obviously for young kids. It probably would just be boring because there is more text and there is more character interaction and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I'll answer the last couple super chats for the small amounts here in a second, but I want to let Jonathan go attend to things he wants to attend to. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on, and you're welcome
Thanks, man.
anytime.
Thanks for having me on. It was good to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, bye everyone.
And let me remove that. There we go. I think we can go back to that. Let me turn the collab cam. There we go. Guys, awesome interview. Awesome. Now we do have some more super chats, but I'm gonna we're gonna take a little brief break here because I gotta go TT because I've been drinking giant amounts of coffee and tea. So let me go to the little girls' room, to the ladies' room. Let this man take a break, and I'm gonna let y'all hear this amazing new remix banger of Mormon Space Wives. So let me just remove myself, and then y'all listen to this banger here, please, because it blew me away. I love it. This one's a good one. Shout out to Polemic Pulse, one of our great remixers.
Mormon Space Wives.
Let's create lives.
Mormon Space Wives. God the Father has a body. It's a very tone body.
He looks good. He looks good.
Mormon Space Wives. Mormon Space Wives. Magic underwear fitting tight. Magic underwear is feeling right.
Space Wives.
Mormon Space Wives. Mormon Space Wives. Lord Cola.
I would like to have intimacies with you.
On the planet of Naboo. Space Wives.
Let's create
Mormon Space Wives. God the Father has a body. It's a very tone body.
He looks good. He looks good. He looks good. He looks good. Good. Space. Sex. Space. Sex.
Space. Mormon Space Wives. Mormon Space Wives. Space error.
All right.
Mormon Space Wives.
Yeah.
Mormon Space Wives.
Mormon Space Wives.
Let's create space.
Phantasm, what's up? He sends $2. Thank you so much, Phantasm. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed that in-depth Pageau interview. It was a lot of fun. Let's see if we can get this Pete B guy to come chat, since he just literally is losing his mind for no reason at all. I mean, nothing he says even makes any sense. It's very much fetish behavior. And I've told him he's acting like a fed, so we'll see. I don't think he will, because he just wants to literally cuss people out for no reason. You'd read the whole exchange. There's literally nothing I said other than that, like, Leo is not a good man merely because he's against war. And this dude just lost his mind over that. It makes no sense at all. Literally makes absolutely no sense. And then we've got second account. How old is the Earth according to us? And are there dinosaurs? I don't have any set opinion on any of that. I mean, I think that dinosaurs could be fake and gay. They could be, creatures in the past that humans thought were dragons, and thus we have the legend of the dragons. Could be any of those things, but I favor the young Earth perspective. So let's see if I missed any super chats here. Also, guys, remember, we do have a show sponsor, which is chalk.com. CHOQ.com, the best in supplementation on the internet, CHOQ.com. You can head on over to chalk.com right there and use the promo code J60Life, that's JY60LIFE, to get 60% off all those great products. And you can get anything right there. You don't have to get that whole package. You can get the Chalk Daily. You can get the individual products themselves, such as the Tomcat Elite right there, Tomcat 100. And use the promo code J60Life, that's JY60LIFE, to get 60% off. Chalk.com, the best in supplementation on the internet. An awesome based company. I don't see any more super chats, but you guys want to continue with another live stream? Maybe we can get some of these loons having actual meltdowns and crash outs. What I said to Trent does not compare to this. I also want to cover more about what's going on with Ruslan, because I had a long DM discussion with Ruslan. And honestly, I was a little let down with Ruslan's approach and solutions to the issues, the problems. However, Ruslan did say that he would be open to some potential future possible debate with the people mentioned. Of course, he said I don't know that they will agree, which I understand that. But he said he's not opposed to it, because I also included him in the challenge. So I challenged him as well. And the thing I was arguing was, I will debate you and Gavin representing the Protestant side and Trent Horn representing the Roman Catholic side at the same time. I have no problem doing that. So that's what I was referring to, because people were saying, how could it be a three-way debate when there's two Protestants and one Catholic? They can be on the same team, Goober. That's how. So let's see. Did I X out the... No, there it is. We had almost 2,000 today live. Appreciate that. When are you going on Rogan? Whenever I get asked. Obviously. Of course. Yeah. As soon as I get asked, that's when I'm going on. If that happens. Mango says for $5. Great discussion. Porphyry says, are super chats tax deductible? Ask your accountant. But probably not. I don't know. Maybe they are. I have no idea. You could have to ask an accountant. Second account. Do you think climate change is real or exaggerated? I think it's exaggerated. I mean, the climate has always fluctuated. It's a scam of the elites to try to create a kind of a new austerity. Jay versus everybody. Not really. I mean, if you guys have noticed, there's really not any Catholic apologists left except for Trent Horn. And according to Gavin Ortlund and Trent Horn, they both don't really want to do debates anymore because the space is toxic. Gavin Ortlund said that he would only debate people who are official credentialed people or, priests. And then they all decide very easily, very quickly to do this discussion with the catechumen on Ruslan's stream. And I just don't buy their excuses and their explanations for it. To me, it seems very underhanded. It seems very slimy, especially given the fact that not only did they say they don't want to debate in the debate sphere, the reasons why they don't debate are not consistently applied. Trent Horn says that he won't debate with toxic individuals like Tim Gordon or Andrew or myself. All those people are too toxic, yet he has no problem appearing on stage with extremely, infinitely more toxic people like Destiny, who has called for the unaliving of conservatives, as well as many other pro-abortion or atheist people who are far worse than any of us. But in Trent's mind, a four-letter word is perhaps worse than Destiny calling for the unaliving of people and calling for violence, as he's done many times. Destiny's done this for a decade, called for violence. He's lost various streaming platforms because of these calls for violence for many, many years. So Trent can't use the excuse that, well, I didn't know this when I debated Destiny. This Destiny is a scandal engine. All he does is create scandal. So the idea that they apply that standard is nonsense. These are excuses. They're all absolutely 100% excuses. So let's see if any of those people can actually step up to the plate, because I'm thankful, as you guys noticed in a lot of the, I know I was reading the comments in response to Ruslan and the comments underneath yesterday's interactions. People aren't buying this anymore. People are realizing that they're not applying their supposed excuses consistently. It's a ploy, and they will debate anybody that they see as low-hanging fruit, but they don't want significant challenges to their position. Exact same with Wes Huff. Wes Huff only wanted to do that dumb debate with Billy Carson, the lowest hanging fruit imaginable, but they don't want any pushback on any of their other positions. Why? Well, this would hurt their brand, right? Bless God Industries would be hurt should he lose this whole Protestant, mindless audience that he has. So that's why they can't salvage a real debate where the positions would be undercut. Now, perhaps Ruslan says he will try to set up something in the future. Maybe. I don't expect them to actually go for it. Slowboy says, Destiny is a known admitted 7K recipient. This leads me to believe that perhaps Trent Horn is as well. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we've seen Trent with a history of promoting absolutely establishment perspectives across the board, which is why he identifies as a male feminist. To see the debate with Tim Gordon that he did on feminism. So I would not put anything past. I think that a lot of these people that we think are just out here defending their position, there are a lot of other motives behind a lot of these people. And I think that's becoming more and more clear. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Great chat with Jonathan. I'm going to stream here in a little bit, so come right back if you want to join me for some who knows what. We don't know what's going to go down. We got a lot of clips that I didn't get to in the previous streams that I'd like to get to. We're going to have fun. We're going to joke around. So if you want to keep streaming with me, come back here in a little bit, and I'll be live.